So we wanted to, we've done a lot of different things with the Gnostic restoration, dealing with Gnostic practices, and one of the things that we sometimes forget to do, especially those of us who wear collars and do churchy stuff, it's easy to forget that the links between Gnosticism and art, and our immediate predecessors, the folks who were involved in the Gnostic restoration. That group was just chock full of artists, surrealist painters, poets. There's always been an overlap between the arts and Gnosticism, because Gnosticism is visionary and creative, and we see the same kind of creativity even in the Gnostic Gospels. The Gnostic, the people wrestled with myths and had visions and created new ways. Jordan Stratford calls them New Testament fan fiction, and sees Gnosticism primarily as a literary movement. I wouldn't go that far, but there's always the artistic impulse is so close to the Gnostic impulse, and one of the ways that Sophia, our Mother Sophia, has manifested herself isn't just in the churchy stuff, and there's nothing wrong. Obviously, I'm in favor of the churchy stuff, but in other ways of expressing ourselves too. So we wanted to sort of just make a little shift today and talk and just have more of a discussion kind of thing about Gnosticism and cinema. And there's been a whole slew of films over the past couple of years that have talked about Gnostic films. But in order to sort of narrow the discussion, because a lot of people throw around the term Gnosticism, and will tell you, for instance, that the Da Vinci Code was a Gnostic film. Da Vinci Code wasn't a Gnostic film. It was bad history meets bad acting.
Meets bad theology.
Maybe it's bad theology.
I don't know if you can say Tom Hanks was a bad actor. Come on, he's Tom Hanks.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Father and I were working on some ideas about what makes a Gnostic film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the main things that a lot of people talk about when they talk about Gnostic themes in literature or pop culture is dualism. So this expresses itself in a number of ways in art. Most frequently, you'll see it as a dichotomy between a real world and a fake world, and we'll get into quite a bit of that in the films later on. But that dualism leads to alienation, a feeling of being outside of the world, a feeling of being outcast. Some forgetfulness, and that shows up a lot, and then of remembering. And anamnesis is the Greek word that we use. So somebody's forgotten something important, and then through a series of revelatory events, they remember it. Again, the world isn't real, or is less real, or is artificial. You'll see that in a lot of Gnostic-y films. There is often some kind of a fall. Somebody who has a position of authority or power or something is brought low, and then they have to return to their greatness. A lot of times there's a demiurge figure. And of course the demiurge is a figure in Gnostic myth who is the creator of the world, but not the true God. So oftentimes you'll see that kind of a figure appear as a character in some of these movies. And of course, in order to be Gnostic, you have to show that knowledge is the salvific element, right? So through knowledge, you come to be saved, or you come to be restored, or whatever the particular motif happens to be. And then, of course, the escape and the transcendence of the false world into the real world. And you'll see that in a lot of the movies that we picked here. And before we talk about any specific movies, I do want to blow the spoiler horn here. We're going to talk about the endings of some movies. So if you haven't seen them, feel free to leave the room or something. I don't know, or fast forward the video if you're watching.
So let's start with the first one we were going to discuss. And as much as I tried to convince Father Anthony, he wouldn't let me talk about the Big Lebowski.
Yep.
So.
I had to put my foot down.
Even though I found a fantastic article last night connecting the plot line of the dude with the Tree of Life and the tarot trumps, and I thought I'd made a pretty good case with it, but no.
Not Gnostic.
All right, so let's start with the Truman Show. Okay.
Which is one of the best examples, I think, of Gnosticism in cinema.
The guy's name is Truman. He's the Anthropos, right? He's the story of the cosmic man who is now entrapped in a false reality, which in this case is the set of a TV show. And working full time to alert him to this false reality, of course, is this also exiled female character whose name was Sophie. Sophia, who is battling Ed Harris's figure, who is the Demiurge, who rules over the TV set. And
at one point, he calls himself the creator. At one point, when Truman finds out what's happening, he says, "Who are you?" And Ed Harris from the moon, right, says, "I am the creator of a television show loved by millions of people." Like a little ham-fisted, but yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I've seen Gene Roddenberry acclaimed as the creator.
Sure, yeah.
But he is. But then you also see with Truman, the true man, one of the common themes of Gnostic films and of Gnosticism, perhaps one of the defining characters is a sense of alienation, and the sense that the world just isn't quite right, and throughout that you see Truman as a young boy wanting to travel, and the teachers discourage him from wanting, and at one point even tries to take a trip, and the Demiurge does everything he can. As a matter of fact, we find out that as the film goes on, the Demiurge is quite willing to kill Truman rather than let him to escape, and really puts his life at risk in the attempt to escape. And of course, it ends with him climbing this ladder and entering into the true world. I think a pretty probably the ones that we looked at, probably the clearest example of a Gnostic film.
And flat out good film, if you ask me. I mean, it's really, I think Jim Carrey has an interesting kind of canon of films, but this was, I think this was one of his, just a perfect role for him, where he could be slightly silly, but still have a seriousness about it. And the part I like about that ending, when you were talking about the ending, is he leaves, he goes out that door, and that's it. You don't see what happens, you don't know what's beyond that, but it's the real world. He can feel comfortable escaping the construct and getting outside of the false creation and into the real world, and it just really lets your imagination kind of fill in the blank of what that's like.
And there's also a saying that we hear repeated quite often, that the liberation of any one individual is an event of cosmic significance. The idea that because we are all connected in some way, that one person freeing themselves has a ripple effect on liberating other folks. And if you remember, after he escapes, the TV show goes off the air, which is always liberating when a reality TV show goes off the air. But not only that, but you see the guy there, the old guy there, the TV show goes off, and he kind of shrugs and puts off the TV and picks up a book.
Yeah, and everybody who's been watching the show around the world, they all kind of like get on with their lives and try something else.
So in a sense, they're also liberated from the false world of the reality TV show, and reconnected to something else that's more real. So I think that's a good example of how there's a tendency in the West for us to approach spirituality in a very individualistic kind of way, because we are trained to be good consumers, and it's a reminder that at a deeper level that our own spiritual work is in the context of the liberation of others, and vice versa.
Has anybody seen The Truman Show? Do you have anything you want to add about it?
You covered it pretty well. It was perfect. That's spot on.
The thing that I always liked about The Truman Show too is the discomfort of everyone around Truman too. That this being part of this complicit lie is not something that weighs easy on the soul of everybody around him, and how the different characters react to, and some characters become allies of Truman's liberation, and then some characters fight against it. And I was always very taken in that film with the struggle that you see with each character, because it's not, the characters aren't totally black and white, like this person is evil and this person isn't. It's, you kind of have a very developed sense of what everybody's incentives are and who kind of can look past their own maybe self-interest in the short term to see that there's a bigger picture of what's going on with Truman and Truman's liberation, and how they, again, the discussion of how we are all sort of tied into everyone's kind of spiritual liberation and practice.
There are a couple of figures who show up in the film who are what we might consider archons. When he first starts to realize that something's wrong and he's trying to escape the people that he sees around him, these guys in suits come out and start to like chase him, and he gets on a bus or something. I can't exactly remember.
Right.
But I think the guys in suits are kind of archontic figures that would qualify to fit that role. The other thing we didn't mention that I think I forgot to put in the notes was what was the creator's name? Christoph.
Right.
Yeah. You could say somebody's trying to point us towards Christ with that name. We were talking about it last night, and I was thinking that it's a lot like Christo the artist, because it's one name
Wraps
things around. He's one of my favorite artists. Thomas thinks he's a sham, but what are you going to do? All right, well, let's move on to, I think, what everybody expects us to talk about.
Yeah, we can't do this without doing the Matrix.
Of course.
Yeah, well, okay, so obviously the world is fake. The world is an illusion created by the machines in this case, who have vested interest in keeping humanity complicit and from, exploring the world. So they have a vested interest in creating as real and a compelling an existence as possible. I know we said we wouldn't talk about the second and third movies, but they do talk about that. Yeah, I'm sorry. They do talk about that a bit, that the first time the machines tried to create a world for the humans, they created it was too nice, and everybody had everybody had it easy and it had everything they wanted, and people didn't buy it, and people were,
That's in the first one. They
was it the first one?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. They all run together because I watch all three of them at the same time every time I watch it. But but yeah. So anyway, Thomas Anderson is his name, right? Son of Man. Anderson is the son of man. Thomas being a kind of a Gnostic-y name.
No, and Thomas also meaning the twin.
Meaning the twin, yeah. And then Neo, obviously, is what he comes to be known as, and Neo is meaning new, of course. So it's a rebirth kind of image there. So,
but it also has a certain Valentinian resonance there. For those, we were just talking about Epiphany. In the Epiphany story, the Soter has descended and taken on some kind of body, and himself needs to be redeemed. He is redeemed along with the angels of the Pleroma who descended with him, and that's what happens in the waters at Epiphany. And so he becomes a new. He himself is redeemed or reborn in the waters of Jordan. So thinking about Thomas Anderson, the Son of Man, being reborn, becoming Neo, becoming new. It's an image that very much resonates there.
Yeah. So Neo, through Morpheus, who's the god of sleep and dreams, so that's where the name Morpheus comes from. Morpheus awakens Neo through knowledge. It's through gnosis and a pill, but it's knowledge. It's the knowledge, through the knowledge that this world is fake. Neo has the ability to transcend it. The interesting thing, though, about the way that they treat the real world in the Matrix is not entirely Gnostic, because the real world in the Matrix, quite frankly, sucks.
Well, I think there is a sense in which it is Gnostic.
Because it is too.
It's clearly, he doesn't enter into sort of the eschatological finality of Gnostic, the realization of the Pleroma and its fullness. What he enters into is having become awakened to the reality of the world, then enters into a phase of combating deception and darkness, which is ugly.
Right.
And so it's obviously his initial awakening to the structure of reality doesn't bring some kind of floating on a cloud kind of fairyland happiness. It actually brings the opposite. Like they say, the truth will make you free, but it'll make you miserable first.
Right, and that's the point that we've talked about this a number of times, but Gnosis isn't the end result. It's not the destination. Gnosis begins the journey, and the journey works towards something else. In the Johannite Church, we talk about it as theosis. You probably use similar terms for it. So you have to go all the way to the third movie to see that, but we won't talk about that. But so the struggle, the Gnosis, the awakening to the reality of the way things are, the struggle, and then in the third movie, overcomes and becomes God. He, in a sense, becomes the divine, the theosis, the divinization.
And the way that he overcomes these forces of darkness, the agents, this I think is one of the most important parts of the movie, is through the mind, in the sense of the way the mind is classically understood, not in the sense that it's understood today. Today, when you talk about consciousness, people think of mind and heart, which is discursive, rational, and emotional. To the Greeks and to the early Gnostics, both of those things would be thought of as part of the psyche, the soul. But there was a higher rational faculty called the noetic faculty, the nous, which was a new level of consciousness. When Jesus came and preached, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand," the word there is metanoia, which is acquire a new level of nous, a new level of consciousness, because the kingdom of heaven is graspable, which makes the whole statement very different than the way we classically understand it. So he defeats the agents not through superior reasoning, because these guys are computers with high processing speed. You can't out-reason them. But it's a higher noetic faculty that gives him insight to the nature of reality. Mm-hmm. And this is what we hear of, like in the Gospel of Thomas, when it talks about the need to develop an eye in place of an eye and an ear in place of an ear. It's talking about developing new faculties of seeing and comprehension. Like the AGC site says, Gnosis isn't just new knowledge, but it's new knowledge understood with new ways of knowing, new faculties of knowledge. It's not just having new information, it's having a new capacity for insight. And it's that insight to the nature of reality that gives Neo the ability to defeat the agents.
Right. Also, there's an emphasis on stillness, which we talked about also last night, that it isn't through actively fighting against the Archons that causes him to win. It's the ability to slow down and to be still and to find that still point. And that's what the bullet time, they did.
They make that point with the cinematography more than anything else, right?
Right. It's the stillness that allows you to overcome.
Which is very Gospel of Thomas. Yeah. It talks about when you enter into the rest, then you'll reign over the all.
Yep.
And there's a stillness even in the midst of the struggle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in the cosmology of the world of the Matrix, the cause of the fall of humanity in the first place is human wisdom. So in a very close parallel to the Sethian myth and the Valentinian creation myth, wisdom creates artificial intelligence.
Right. He says, what is it? The whole world was united as it gave birth to AI.
Yeah.
Its greatest achievement, AI.
Yeah.
And it was AI that ended up. And so it's wisdom disconnected from reality, which is a retelling of the Sophia myth in its own way. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure most everybody here has seen The Matrix. Anybody have any other? Yes?
And also, I'm sorry, I can't raise my voice too much, but it made clear that some people have the opportunity to be awakened, but they choose not to.
Certainly.
As I forget his name, a trader, who said, I want to forget all this, I just want to have a steak.
Yeah.
He knew he had the opportunity to see reality, but he wanted to remain in the false world.
Right.
So that some people choose ignorance.
Right, because quite frankly, it's easier.
Yeah, exactly.
Sandy?
That was what I
Okay.
That's what you were gonna say.
Oh, terrific.
Great minds.
Yeah, and in this, I believe it's the second movie. Cover your ears. One of the incidental characters goes up to Neo in the human city and says, will you, and Neo is kind of a godlike figure, a Christ-like figure at this point in the story, and the woman comes up to him and says, "Will you pray for my son? He's aboard the Gnosis." So one of the ships in the thing is called Gnosis.
Well, right at the beginning of the film, when the guy's buying the hardware off of him, the guy who's buying the hardware says, "Yeah, you're my personal savior, Jesus Christ."
Yeah.
And it just kind of passes this conversation until you realize that's who he's talking to.
Right. So pretty good. Yeah.
It's been a really long time since I've seen The Matrix, but also isn't there something with in the beginning with also allusions to like the White Rabbit and Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
And again, the sense of duality, two realities.
There's a lot of little things like the ship when you first the first time you ever glimpse the ship, the Nebuchadnezzar in the first one, you get a reference to. They briefly show the model number of the ship, and it's Mark something number whatever. And if you look up that verse in Mark, it actually refers to how spirits and unclean devils and unclean spirits would flee in saying, "You are the Son of God" or the Son of Man or whatever the reference is.
Yeah, the movie's chock full of it. If you look in the corners of the screen, you'll see a whole bunch of these neat little things. Anyway. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about a movie I had to see twice in order to really kind of understand what was going on. Vanilla Sky. Anybody seen this one? No, I'm not entirely surprised. Tom Cruise movie.
Originally, it's a remake of a Spanish movie.
Right.
Which was called Abre los Ojos. Open Your Eyes.
Open your eyes.
And in case you were wondering, is this a Gnostic movie? The English version with Tom Cruise in it begins with Sophia, saying, "Open your eyes."
No, it's Sophia. It's not Sophia.
Is it Sophia?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sophia saying, "Open your eyes."
Yeah.
So sort of from the get-go, this is a clue that somebody's been reading their Nag Hammadi.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just to briefly give you the synopsis. Tom Cruise is he's the heir to a big publishing company. His parents died years ago, and people kind of think he's a screw-up because he kind of is. He has this kind of weird relationship with Cameron Diaz's character, and Cameron Diaz's character thinks their relationship is more important than Tom Cruise's character thinks that it is. So, and she's a little bit crazy, so she drives him off a cliff, or off a bridge rather. Overpass, yeah. And he ends up in a coma, and his face is disfigured, and then he ends up in prison because they think that he killed her.
No, he ends up in prison because
it's very confusing.
Because they think that he killed Sophia.
They think that he killed Sophia.
Right.
Right. But it turns out the whole world is fake anyway. I told you there'd be spoilers. So he's in a dream. He's dreaming. He paid a company to put him in a suspended animation until such time as he would be able to be, his face would be
And
restored,
they were supposed to be feeding him good dreams all this time, but there's been a glitch.
Yeah.
There's an error, and instead of having these good dreams until they can revive him and fix him, he's having nightmares, which reminds me, it's a very Gurdjieffian approach. Gurdjieff used to say that people are asleep and they're having nightmares. The average person you meet on the street is asleep and having nightmares, and that's exactly what the Tom Cruise figure in the film is doing. And it's interesting that the way he has to wake up from the dream at the end of the movie, again, we told you there were going to be spoiler alerts, is he has to make a leap of faith, and he has to literally make a leap off a tall building.
Yeah.
And he wakes up into reality.
Yeah, he has to confront his fear of heights and jump off this building, and it's an entertaining movie, visually very stunning. They filmed part of it in Times Square, and it was completely empty. Like they cleared out Times Square, and Tom Cruise is just running down the street, and there's nobody, no cars, no taxis, nothing. Anyway, the opening scene of the movie is pretty interesting. All right, so nobody's seen that one then? All right, go rent it. It's not bad. Okay, so The Wizard of Oz. This one I never thought of really as Gnostic, but we went through it, and it's got quite a few points to it that are kind of
Well,
Gnostic.
L. Frank Baum, of course, wrote the book, was a Theosophist, so.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
Mhm.
it's a tie in there.
You've got a woman who's in exile from her homeland, much like the Sophia myth. One of the central Gnostic stories is the soul and Sophia Achamoth in exile from the Pleroma, in this world that's an illusionary kind of place, a dream world. And of course, the Gospel of Thomas talks about how the kingdom of heaven is within you. That you seek and you keep on seeking until you find, and then it's revealed to you, and you reign over the all. And of course, this is a story of Dorothy, that she continues to seek, and inevitably finds out that the wizard, the guy who's in charge of the false world, is a fraud, which is certainly one way that we would describe Saklas or Yaldabaoth, the demiurge. He is an imposter, and he's full of hot air, just like the wizard was. But she also discovers that the means of her liberation had been at hand or at foot the entire time, and it was remembrance of her home that liberated her.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to the point of anamnesis that we've talked about. And anamnesis is a fascinating word, because it doesn't mean remembering. It actually means unforgetting. Like amnesia is forgetfulness. Amnesia is unforgetfulness. And just to stray off for a second, in the institution of the Eucharist, when Jesus says, "Do this in remembrance of me," the word there in the Greek for remember is translated remembrance, which makes it just sound like have a toast to Jesus, is actually anamnesis. It's an unforgetfulness, and it ties into the Platonic idea that the soul before incarnating knew its origins and knew spiritual reality and has forgotten it, and so part of what's happening here is the anamnesis, the remembering of where your home is. And of course, she finds out that she's always had the means of liberation, and her companions find out that they always had what they were looking for. The lion was always brave. The Tin Man always had a heart. The Scarecrow was always bright. And it took the quest for them to discover that within them.
I think the next couple of movies that we're going to talk about are very similar in this kind of a theme. It's the Hymn of the Pearl, that you read from in the Acts of Thomas and the Apostles, or in India, I think it's the book that comes from, right? Acts of Thomas and the Apostles.
I wanted to add something to her name is Dorothy. I believe that means gift of God, doesn't it, in Greek, Dorothea?
Dora is gift.
Yeah.
Theos, Dorotheos, and Thea
gift
is
of
God. Yeah.
So I guess that's also significant. Yeah.
Anybody else want to add anything about Wizard of Oz? 1937?
39.
39. Yeah.
It's not in the movie, but in the book, one of the things that happens is when they go to the Emerald City, they have to put on these green goggles, and the idea is that the Emerald City really isn't this Emerald City, but that the false wizard makes you put on something over your eyes to mediate the way that you see the world. And the act
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the act of putting the glasses on and off, and I think there's some other, there's some other examples I can think of in pop literature and film where,
Well, there's Kant's blue spectacles.
like obscuring vision and
Right.
having something that mediates the way that you interact with your reality.
Huge anti-peril-sensitive sunglasses will prevent you from seeing anything which could alarm you.
Actually, there was a movie called Them, and Roddy Piper
Yeah.
played in it, and you had to put
That's a
on
good
these
point.
glasses to see the world how it really is.
Yeah, and see all the
Rather than-
aliens.
I thought them was giant
It
ants.
was like a
No. Was it They Live or Them?
Maybe it was They Live.
I don't know. All I remember is he came to kick ass and chew bubble gum, and he's all out of bubble gum. Yeah, that's a good point. I had forgotten about that movie, but that might be one to add to the list later. But anyway, okay. So let's move on to the next movie, which is one of my favorite Gnostic movies, which is not for the faint of heart. Pan's Labyrinth.
Oh, I got
Yes.
Yeah. It's a terrific movie. There are parts of it that I've seen a lot of gory movies. Parts of that make me cringe. There are only a couple of them, but they're like
It's not a kids movie.
It's not a kids
Very
movie.
dark.
Yeah, very very dark. It takes place during the Spanish Revolution, and it's the story of a little girl and her mother who travel to this kind of disputed area where there's the rebels on one side and the army on the other, and they're fighting, and the mother is marrying a general, I believe it was, in the Spanish army, and she has anyway, and so the mother thinks this is going to make the child secure and everything, but the child has a very vivid imagination, and I didn't write down her. Ophelia is the child's name, and Ophelia is obsessed with fairy tales, and she's always reading books and everything. Ophelia wanders off one night following this kind of insect thing, fairy insect, whatever it happens to be, and finds a labyrinth. And at the center, this Pan figure, this kind of goat man figure in the center, says, "Oh my goodness, you're the princess that we've lost all this time ago. We've been here on Earth looking for you, and finally we found you."